the architect of truth. Eric Caldwell's phone erupted like a fire alarm in a silent monastery, shattering the precision of his morning. He was hunched over blueprints for the Skyline Summit, a 30-story tower of glass and steel, destined to redefine Denver's skyline, when the call came. His wife, Rachel, sounded like she'd been hit by a freight train. "Eric, get home now," she gasped, her voice a jagged edge of panic. "Something awful's happened. Hurry!" The line went dead, leaving Eric, a man who thrived on angles and order, grasping at shadows. He snatched his keys, abandoning a half-sketched atrium and a room full of junior architects staring like they'd just seen a building code violation come to life. His Tesla sliced through Denver's sun-dappled streets, past artisanal coffee shops and yoga studios that seemed to multiply like roaches in a cheap apartment. The Rockies loomed in the distance, their peaks sharp enough to puncture his racing thoughts. Eric had spent 3 years building their homia, sleek, glass-walled masterpiece perched on a hill overlooking Cherry Creek. Every beam, every panel was a testament to his belief that beauty could be engineered. But as he screeched into the driveway, his stomach lurched. Police cruisers swarmed the house, their red and blue lights flashing like a discount rave gone wrong. His 14-year-old daughter, Mia, stood on the lawn, her hoodie damp with tears, her face a map of distress. "Dad, wait," she said, grabbing his arm with the desperation of a kid who'd seen too much. "Mom's okay, but it's bad. Let her explain before you lose it." Eric stepped into the living room, and his heart dropped like a poorly anchored scaffold. The scene was straight out of a low-budget crime drama, the kind you'd find on a streaming service's bargain bin. Blood stained the oak floors he'd sanded himself. Pooling under the mid-century sofa he'd splurged on to impress clients with more money than taste. Rachel stood beside a detective, her yoga pants and tank top splattered with crimson, looking like she'd wandered into a paintball game gone horribly awry. Her eyes met his, wide and glassy, but something in them felt off, like a blueprint missing its load-bearing calculations. Detective Sandra Monroe introduced herself, her posture sagging like a building on a bad foundation. "Mr. Caldwell, your wife's been through hell," she said, her voice as flat as a city council meeting. "She says a man broke in, threatened her with a knife, and she fought back. He's dead. Name's Victor Kane." Monroe laid out Rachel's story with the enthusiasm of a DMV clerk. Rachel was home, probably perfecting her warrior pose or folding organic cotton towels, when she heard glass shatter. Victor Kane, a career crook with a rap sheet longer than a zoning code manual, mostly burglaries, a few bar brawl, stormed in with a knife. Rachel, fueled by panic and a fireplace poker, turned the tables and ended him. Self-defense, clean and simple, the kind of case the cops could wrap up before their coffee went cold. They were ready to file it away faster than a city planner approves a strip mall. But Eric, who could spot a misaligned joist from a football field away, saw cracks in the story. No broken windows, no pre-open locks. The smart security system, which he'd wired with the precision of a Swiss watch, hadn't logged a single alert. How does a 5'4" yoga instructor take down a 6' ex-con with a blade? And why was Rachel's phone buzzing with a text from Nate Grayson, Eric's landscape designer for Skyline Summit, saying, "We need to talk. Urgent?" Eric's mind, trained to connect dots into structures, started drafting a darker blueprint. He mumbled an excuse about needing water and slipped into his home office, a minimalist sanctuary of oak paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows that made him feel briefly invincible. Rachel's laptop was open, a rookie mistake for someone supposedly shaken by a near-death experience. A hidden email account revealed a trail of messages between her and Nate, dripping with promises of a new life in some sun-soaked paradise. Think palm trees, Mai Tais, and zero responsibilities. They'd been siphoning thousands of dollars from their joint account, small enough withdrawals to slip under Eric's radar, like termites eating away at a foundation. His heart took a hit, but his curiosity burned hotter than a blowtorch. Who was Victor Kane to them? A quick search through public records linked Kane to Nate through a landscaping job in Boulder, where Kane had been fired for decking a coworker over a botched sod delivery. The dots weren't just connecting, they were screaming conspiracy. The police stamped justifiable homicide on Kane's death and moved on faster than a developer flips a gentrified block. Eric wasn't buying it. He turned his office into a war room, pinning photos, bank statements, and timelines to a corkboard like he was auditioning for a true crime podcast with a cult following. He found records of Rachel and Nate meeting at a cabin in Estes Park, owned by a shell company tied to Nate's Landscaping LLC. Bank transfers showed Nate funneling cash to Kanesums that could buy a small forest of ornamental shrubs, far more than a guy who trimmed hedges should be handling. Then there was the life insurance policy, taken out 6 months ago, naming Rachel as Eric's sole beneficiary for $2 million. The blueprint was coming into focus, and it wasn't a home, it was a coffin, with Eric's name etched on it. He needed help, someone who could dig deeper without tipping off Rachel or Nate. Enter Lena Torres, a private investigator who looked like she could bench press a city planner and had a reputation for unearthing secrets dirtier than a construction site after a rainstorm. Lena didn't mess around. Her report landed like a sledgehammer. Nate had been in contact with Roy Maddox, a fixer whose idea of problem solving involved a crowbar and a bad attitude. Kane wasn't a random burglar. He'd been hired, likely by Nate, for a job that went sideways. Eric's theory crystallized. Rachel and Nate had planned to stage his death, maybe a robbery gone wrong, but Kane botched it, and Rachel improvised with the poker. The blood in the living room wasn't part of the plan. It was the plan's wreckage, a sloppy cover-up for a scheme gone south. Eric played the part of the clueless husband with an Oscar-worthy performance, all while laying his own trap. He suggested a family getaway to the mountains, casually dropping the Estes Park cabin into conversation. Rachel's face twitched like a bad electrical circuit, a tell she couldn't hide. He brought up updating their life insurance, watching her eyes light up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. To shore up his plan, Eric built a team of allies, his own personal avengers. He schmoozed Sonny Whitaker, a real estate tycoon whose network was thicker than a building code manual. Tara Boone, a lawyer who could smell fraud faster than a contractor spots an upcharge, and Wes Carver, a media exec who owed Eric for designing his vacation home in Aspen. They were his scaffolding, holding up his plan as it took shape. The climax unfolded at the cabin, where Eric, with Lena's tech savvy, rigged hidden cameras and microphones like he was staging a sting for a reality show. He set up a confrontation, pretending to suspect Rachel's affair, baiting her and Nate to spill their guts. Nate swaggered in, all cocky grins and bad cologne, and the two took the bait like fish in a barrel. They talked about Eric's suicide, how they'd frame it, how the $2 million insurance payout would fund their escape to a beachside villa. They even laughed about skimming funds from Skyline Summit, a side hustle of embezzlement Eric hadn't suspected. Every word was caught on tape, clear as a blueprint's lines. The cops, tipped off by Lena, crashed the party like a SWAT team at a bake sale. Rachel and Nate's faces, frozen in shock, were plastered across every news outlet in Colorado. Eric's evidence ensured convictions, and Skyline Summit broke ground on schedule. Eric, battered but unbowed, started drafting a new chapter for his life, one where he was the architect of his own future. But this story isn't just a pulse-pounding thriller, it's a blueprint for breaking free from the chains of complacency. Eric didn't just survive betrayal, he turned it into a triumph that could inspire anyone stuck in a rut. Think about it. How many of us sleepwalk through life, ignoring the cracks in our own foundations? Maybe it's a job that's draining your soul, a dream you've shelved, because someday feels safer than today, or a relationship built on sand instead of steel. Eric saw the signs, questioned the narrative, and took action with the precision of a master builder. He didn't wait for the collapse. He grabbed his tools and started rebuilding. That's the lesson here. You don't need a crisis to redesign your life. You just need the courage to pick up the pencil and start sketching. If this story lit a fire under you, hit that subscribe button to join a community of builders, dreamers, and truth chasers who refuse to settle for the ordinary. Drop a comment below. What's one bold step you're ready to take to tear down the walls holding you back and build something extraordinary? Let's spark a revolution of action. Shake off the dust of boredom and construct lives that soar like skyscrapers. Eric's journey started with a single, jarring moment. But it wasn't the phone call that defined him, it was what he did next. Let's rewind and unpack how he got there, because the details matter, and they're packed with lessons for anyone looking to rebuild their own life. Eric was no stranger to pressure. As an architect, he thrived on it, turning chaos into structures that defied gravity. The Skyline Summit was his magnum opus, a project that had developers salivating and competitors green with envy. He'd spent months perfecting every detail, from the atrium's sweeping curves to the eco-friendly HVAC system that could make a tree hugger weep. His office was a sanctuary, a place where pens were aligned like soldiers, and every blueprint was a promise of progress. But when Rachel's call came, it was like someone had yanked the keystone out of his carefully constructed world. The drive home was a study in controlled chaos. Denver's streets were a mix of hipster havens and corporate towers, a city caught between its crunchy granola roots and its shiny new ambitions. Eric barely noticed the craft breweries or the yoga studios with their Namaste all-day signs. His mind was on Rachel, on Mia, on the home he'd built as a monument to their family. He'd chosen every element with care: the glass walls to let in light, the open floor plan to foster connection. But as he pulled into the driveway, the police cruisers were a gut punch. Their lights flashed with the kind of urgency that screamed, budget cuts and bad coffee. Mia's tear-streaked face was the first clue that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Her plea to wait for Rachel's explanation only deepened the knot in his stomach. Stepping into the living room, Eric felt like he'd walked onto a movie set where the director had yelled, "Cut!" but forgotten to clean up. The blood on the floor was real, though, and it clashed horribly with the aesthetic he'd spent years perfecting. Rachel's appearance, yoga gear splattered with crimson, made her look like she'd auditioned for a slasher flick and gotten carried away. Detective Monroe's rundown of the incident was clinical, almost bored. Victor Kane, she said, was a small-time crook with a history of breaking into houses and starting fights in dive bars. Rachel's story was straight out of a self-defense seminar. She heard glass break, saw Kane with a knife, and somehow managed to grab the fireplace poker and take him down. The cops were ready to call it a day, but Eric's architect brain, wired to spot flaws in design, saw inconsistencies that screamed louder than a bad contractor's excuses. No broken glass, no forced entry. The security system, which Eric had programmed to alert him if a squirrel so much as sneezed near the property, was silent. Rachel's story hinged on her overpowering a man who looked like he could bench press a Buick, and Eric wasn't buying it. Then there was the text from Nate Grayson, popping up on Rachel's phone like a plot twist in a bad novel. Nate was Eric's go-to guy for landscaping, a charming former frat boy who could make a lawn look like a Monet painting. But "we need to talk. Urgent?" That wasn't about azaleas or irrigation systems. Eric's gut told him something was rotten, and it wasn't just the compost heap Nate had pitched for Skyline Summit. Retreating to his office, Eric felt the walls of his world closing in. The space was his refuge, a place where chaos was tamed by clean lines and precise measurements. Rachel's laptop was open, a careless mistake that made his pulse quicken. A hidden email account revealed a trail of betrayal. Rachel and Nate were lovers, plotting to ditch Denver for a life of sandy beaches and fruity cocktails. They'd been draining their joint account, pulling out thousands in small, sneaky increments. Eric's heart felt like it had been hit by a wrecking ball, but his mind was already at work, connecting dots like a structural engineer mapping load paths. A search tied Kane to Nate through a Boulder job where Kane had been fired for turning a coworker's face into a punching bag. The pieces were forming a picture, and it was uglier than a strip mall built on a budget. The police closed the case with the efficiency of a fast food drive-through, but Eric wasn't ready to sign off. He turned his office into a detective's lair, pinning evidence to a corkboard like he was channeling his inner Columbo. Photos of Rachel and Nate's secret meetings, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, and a timeline of their affair formed a mosaic of deceit. The Estes Park cabin, owned by a shell company linked to Nate's LLC, was their hideout. Bank records showed Nate paying Kane sums that could fund a small startup, not just a landscaping gig. The life insurance policy was the final nail. $2 million, with Rachel set to cash in if Eric met an untimely end. The blueprint was clear, and it was designed to bury him. Eric knew he needed help to dig deeper, so he called Lena Torres. Lena was a force of nature, a PI who could probably deadlift a dumpster and had a knack for finding dirt where others saw clean slates. Her report was a bombshell. Nate had been talking to Roy Maddox, a fixer whose reputation made loan sharks look cuddly. Kane wasn't a random thief. He was a hired hand, and the job had gone wrong. Eric's theory took shape. Rachel and Nate had planned to stage his death, maybe as a botched robbery, but Kane flubbed it, and Rachel had to clean up the mess with the poker. The blood in the living room was the fallout of a plan that collapsed like a badly designed bridge. Eric played dumb, channeling the oblivious husband with a performance that could have fooled a polygraph. He suggested a family trip to the mountains, name-dropping the Estes Park cabin to gauge Rachel's reaction. Her face twitched like a circuit board shorting out, a tell that confirmed his suspicions. He brought up updating their life insurance, watching her eyes light up like a Black Friday sale at a tech store. To tighten the net, he built a team. Sonny Whitaker, a real estate mogul with a Rolodex thicker than a skyscraper's foundation, was his first recruit. Tara Boone, a lawyer who could spot a lie faster than a building inspector spots shoddy wiring, was next. Wes Carver, a media exec who owed Eric for designing his Aspen getaway, rounded out the crew. They were his rebar, holding his plan together. The final act played out at the cabin, where Eric, with Lena's tech wizardry, rigged cameras and mics like he was producing a sting for a true crime documentary. He staged a confrontation, pretending to suspect Rachel's affair, baiting her and Nate to spill their scheme. Nate strutted in, all smug grins and cheap aftershave, and the two took the bait like fish chasing a shiny lure. They talked about Eric's suicide, the $2 million payout, and how they'd skimmed funds from Skyline Summit to bankroll their escape. Every word was recorded, clear as a blueprint's annotations. The cops, tipped off by Lena, stormed in like they were auditioning for a Hollywood blockbuster. Rachel and Nate's shocked faces were front-page news, and Eric's evidence ensured they'd be trading their beach dreams for prison bars. Skyline Summit broke ground on time, its glass towers rising like a phoenix from the ashes of Eric's old life. Eric's story isn't just a thrill ride, it's a blueprint for anyone stuck in the quicksand of complacency. He didn't just survive betrayal, he turned it into a foundation for something greater. Life hands us all blueprints, some shoddy, some solid. Too often, we ignore the cracks, jobs that drain us, dreams we've buried, relationships that creak under the weight of lies. Eric saw the flaws, questioned the design, and rebuilt with purpose. He didn't wait for the collapse. He grabbed his tools and started sketching a new future. That's the call to action here. Don't let life's bad designs bury you. Pick up your pencil, redraw your plans, and build something that stands tall. If this story lit a spark in you, hit that subscribe button to join a tribe of builders, dreamers, and truth seekers who refuse to settle for shaky foundations. Drop a comment. What's one bold move you're ready to make to redesign your life and break free from the ordinary? Let's ignite a movement, shake off the dust of routine, and construct lives that soar like skyscrapers. Eric's journey didn't end with the arrests. He spent months rebuilding, not just his life, but his sense of purpose. Mia became his anchor, her resilience a reminder that family was worth fighting for. He threw himself into Skyline Summit, turning it into a symbol of renewal. The tower's glass facade caught the Colorado sun, reflecting a city ready to rise. Eric started mentoring young architects, sharing his story, not the gritty details, but the lesson: life's setbacks are just blueprints for comebacks. He launched a community initiative, funding scholarships for kids like Mia, who dreamed big but lacked the means. Every step was a brick in his new foundation, each one laid with intention. The humor in Eric's story comes from its absurdity: how a man who could design a skyscraper nearly missed the collapse of his own home. It's a satire of our blind spots, the way we polish our facades while ignoring the rot inside. Denver's hipster culture, with its overpriced lattes and yoga studios on every corner, became a backdrop for Eric's awakening. The cops, with their rush to close the case, were a jab at bureaucracy's love for tidy endings. But the real punchline? Eric's triumph wasn't revenge, it was reinvention. He didn't just outsmart Rachel and Nate, he outsmarted his own complacency, proving that the best designs come from facing the truth head-on. This story's value lies in its challenge. Stop settling. Eric's life was a blueprint gone wrong, but he redrew it with courage. You can too. Whether it's quitting a soul-sucking job, chasing a passion you've shelved, or confronting a truth you've dodged, the tools are in your hands. Don't wait for a crisis to wake you up. Start now, sketch boldly, and build a life that stands the test of time. Subscribe to join the builders, and tell us in the comments, what's the one change you're ready to make to construct your masterpiece? Let's tear down the ordinary and raise something extraordinary.